The golden lights of the luxury hotel hallway glowed softly against the polished marble floors, reflecting the quiet elegance of the five-star building. Most guests were already asleep, their doors closed behind thick wooden panels, but the silence of the corridor was suddenly broken by the faint sound of a trembling voice. Emily, a young hotel maid barely 23 years old, sat on the carpeted floor near the wall with a phone pressed tightly to her ear. Her yellow cleaning gloves were still on her hands, and her uniform apron was slightly wrinkled from a long exhausting shift. Tears rolled slowly down her pale cheeks as she tried to keep her voice steady. "Mom, please don't worry. I'll find a way," she whispered, though her heart was breaking. On the other end of the phone, her mother's weak voice struggled through the static. The hospital had called again that evening. Emily's younger brother needed an urgent surgery, and the amount required was far beyond anything their poor family could afford. Emily had been working double shifts for weeks, cleaning rooms, polishing floors, and carrying heavy carts, hoping to save enough money, but it still wasn't even close. She wiped her tears quickly, afraid someone might see her. But someone already had. At the far end of the hallway, a tall man in a dark suit had just stepped out of the elevator. His name was Daniel Harrington, one of the youngest billionaires in the country and the owner of a global hotel empire. Though he rarely visited his properties personally, tonight he had arrived quietly for an unannounced inspection. As he walked down the corridor, his footsteps slowed when he noticed the maid sitting on the floor, her shoulders shaking slightly as she tried to hide her tears. Daniel wasn't the type of man who ignored things like that. He had built his empire from nothing after losing his own parents at a young age, and something about the girl's quiet desperation reminded him painfully of the struggles he once faced. He paused a few meters away, not wanting to startle her, and pretended to check his phone while listening unintentionally to her conversation. "I promise I'll help him, Mom, please tell him to stay strong," Emily said softly before ending the call. She lowered the phone slowly and covered her face with both hands, trying to control her emotions. That was when she noticed the shadow of someone standing nearby. Startled, she quickly stood up, embarrassed that a guest had seen her like this. "I'm so sorry, sir," she said nervously, lowering her head. "I'll get back to work immediately." Daniel studied her for a moment. Her eyes were red from crying, yet there was determination in them. "It's all right," he said calmly. "Long night." Emily forced a small smile. "Just a little tired, sir." She didn't want to burden a stranger with her problems. Daniel glanced briefly at the cleaning cart beside her and then back at her face. "You should take a break," he said quietly. "Everyone deserves one." Emily nodded politely, though she knew she couldn't afford to slow down. Daniel didn't ask anything more. He simply gave her a small reassuring nod before continuing toward his suite at the end of the hallway. But as he walked away, the image of the crying maid stayed in his mind. Something about her pain felt genuine, something he couldn't ignore. That night Daniel barely slept. His thoughts kept returning to the girl in the hallway and the desperation in her voice. Early the next morning, while the sun's soft light began to shine through the hotel windows, the staff gathered in the lobby for their usual morning briefing. Emily stood quietly in the back, exhausted from the previous night. Suddenly the hotel manager rushed in, looking unusually nervous. "Everyone, please stand straight," he whispered urgently. "The owner of the entire Harrington Hotel group is here this morning." The room instantly filled with whispers. None of the employees had ever met him before. Then the lobby doors opened, and Daniel Harrington walked in. His presence alone commanded attention, dressed in a sharp suit with calm confidence. Emily froze the moment she saw him. Her heart skipped a beat. It was the same man from the hallway. The manager quickly greeted him and began introducing the staff. Daniel listened politely, but his eyes quietly scanned the room until they found Emily standing nervously in the back. After the introductions, he stepped forward and spoke in a calm voice. "I visited the hotel last night without announcing myself," he said. "And during that visit, I saw something important." The employees looked at each other, worried they might have done something wrong. Daniel continued, "I saw someone who works harder than anyone should have to, someone who stayed strong even while facing personal struggles." Emily's heart started pounding faster. Daniel then looked directly at her. "Miss, could you please come forward?" The entire staff turned their heads toward Emily as she slowly stepped out of the line, confused and embarrassed. She expected to be scolded for sitting in the hallway during her shift. Instead, Daniel smiled gently. "Last night I overheard part of your phone call," he said honestly. "I'm sorry for listening, but I couldn't ignore what I heard." Emily's face turned pale. She quickly tried to explain. "Sir, I promise I wasn't neglecting my work. I was just—" Daniel raised a hand softly to stop her. "You don't need to explain." He then turned to the manager and said calmly, "Arrange for the company foundation to cover the full cost of her brother's surgery immediately." The entire room went silent. Emily stared at him, unable to process what she had just heard. Tears instantly filled her eyes again, but this time they were tears of shock and gratitude. Daniel continued speaking gently, "And starting today, Emily will be promoted to guest relations trainee. Hard-working people deserve opportunities." Emily covered her mouth in disbelief as the weight of his words finally sank in. The staff around her began quietly applauding, amazed by the unexpected moment of kindness. Daniel simply gave her a reassuring smile before turning toward the exit. Before he left, he paused and said one last thing to the staff and to the viewers of this story. Sometimes the smallest moment of compassion can change someone's entire life. Never ignore a person who is struggling.